welcome everyone to 14 Minutes of Fame with Missy Henkel. Today I have the wonderful Camilla Thompson from MouldSafe.
Hello.
Really excited to have you out chatting today, Camilla. I have to say I've been wanting to chat to you. I know a company called Nature's Defence that does stuff with mold, the kill and removal process of mold. It's not an easy task, and everybody says you can't kill mold, so it's quite interesting then to come across somebody else who does mold remediation. It's mold, I find fascinating yet horrific. Like it's such an interesting conversation because it's so big and it's so horrible what it can do when it's inside the house with the people, but you know, outside in the world it holds its space. Like, I mean, that's what it's for. It's to help break down all the rubbish and do lots of good stuff out there, but inside in the house we seem to have created places where it just has found a new place to hide, you know. So just wondering, with your mold remediation, how did you fall into this?
Well, I had a lived experience. So I lived unknowingly in mold for about 8 years in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. And I was sick for 8 years ongoing and saw lots of different doctors, kinesiologists, naturopaths. No one could work out what was wrong with me at the time, and got quite gaslighted by GPs who just, said there was nothing wrong with me. It was in my head. And eventually I got so ill and we found out that it was mold. My business partner found it in my house, in my bedroom, in every room in our house. And we, within 24 hours, had to leave our home, all of our belongings. And I spent 18 months in treatment. So incredibly traumatic, emotional, distressing time. And I was so overwhelmed and it was so confusing and it cost me so much money trying to get it tested, trying to get it fixed, trying to get my health back on track. And I just didn't really know where to turn at the time. There was one website, Toxic Mold Australia Facebook group, which was an absolute lifeline, but there wasn't that many resources. There wasn't that much support. So when I moved to Central Coast 4 or 5 years ago, I decided to set a business up in mold about 18 months ago now, to help other people and to try and guide them through what is an incredibly overwhelming time when you're living in mold.
Absolutely. 8 years, that's extreme.
It was a long time. It was on and off. I mean, the main symptoms were I had constant eye infections, bulging eyes. I was always dehydrated. It was like I drank a bottle of red wine every night, but I wasn't. Waking up with hangovers. You feel like you've got a permanent hangover. And yeah, then it started going into my body. So I had what mimicked arthritis and pain and really bad
So truthfully,
anxiety.
it was in your head, wasn't it? Like, I mean, doctors
Yes,
saying it's all in your head. Well, it was. That's
well, it
exactly how it was
was.
growing, right?
Well, I had it growing up my nose. They call it mark-ons. So that's where you're inhaling the mold spores and they lodge themselves up here and then they start growing into your brain.
Wow.
So when you go through a treatment plan, that's actually the final stage of your treatment plan. So you go through, I was about 12 months taking a binder, which helps you detox the mold out your system. And then at the very end, you have a nasal spray and that kills what's going on up here. That's the final piece of the puzzle. And then, off you go.
Holy cow. I know I've come across mold stories over the years. So prior to meeting you, and I met Nora 4 years ago, and I knew her, uh, she was in my sales classes and she was doing websites at the time. And then she wanted to change to something else. And she said, but my fascination is in mold. I'll do that. Like, you know, there's plenty of rain out there. I'm pretty sure everyone's got it. Like, so it's pretty important, something to go after and fix. So I've been in these stories of mold, like noticing stories of mold for at least the last 4 years. But then I'd heard a couple of stories prior to that. So then when these things crop up, I know Simon, my husband, he watches a show on YouTube called Script Garage. And
Right.
this guy, right, he's a mechanic, but like he's a real old school mechanic. I mean, he's probably about our age, but he's a real old school mechanic, you know, that he just tinkers with things and how does this work and how does this work? And he gets hold of all these extremely old cars, like that have been sitting on a driveway for 19 years or something like that. And then someone calls and says, any chance you can see if it works? And then he goes over and he taps here and he taps here and he spends hours tapping and touching every part. And I do this and I do this and this bit does. And then he finally turns it on. But when he opens up the car every time, he goes, there's mold. There's always mold. Oh, look at here. And I'm like,
Interesting.
wow, my head is like, you know,
Yeah.
Oh my God, there's a way that you could do it. There's ways to do that. Like he has a way, and then Nora's got a way. I'm sure you'll have a different way. And, so it's really, I noticed these mold stories like everywhere. There was one where literally a whole garden of mold was growing inside of a car. And it
Oh,
was it was actually beautiful. Like when you opened it up, you think it was like they'd actually turned it into a gardening pot and they'd made it its own thing. And when you think about it, like I hear the stories of, like it's nature's defense. Mold is important
yep.
in the world. But ultimately it's really like when I watch what's that, Grand Designs.
Yes.
Watch Grand Designs, right? I remember watching this one episode of Grand Designs where the guy had bought a castle and wanted to bring it back to life, and it was an extreme task, way more extreme than what he thought. And I mean, there was no roof. It was like the castle edges and all this other stuff. But ultimately, the world was trying to take it back, like the land back. That's how long it had been
Yeah.
as a castle. And so now I look at mold and going, oh, that's what mold's doing. Like, if someone says I've got mold in the house, it's like, it's literally just trying to pull it all back down to rubble. Like, I mean, if you let it go, that's what it's trying to do. It's trying to pull everything back down to land space. But of course, we have to live in houses. So mold's good, just not in with us. And
Yeah, that's such a good point, actually. It's so interesting. I think it's roughly 1 in 2 people are living in mold in New South Wales, and Queensland. So New South Wales has the highest reported cases of mold for insurance, but I think that's because a lot of Queenslanders just put up with it because they're used to it. And I mean, our climate here in Australia is just primed for mold. Like
oh yeah.
we get the really heavy downfall of rain, then we get humidity. Winter is hard, like ventilation. Like the saddest stories we hear are of people in retirement villages, and they are living in these small little rooms and they don't have any ventilation and they've got really bad mold, and a lot of them are struggling to breathe. And that just breaks our heart because it's like these people have worked all their lives and then they are ending up their life struggling to breathe in this 4x4 room in a retirement village,
And they
spending
tried not
ridiculous
to
money.
smoke, and they tried to do the right
Yeah,
thing, and they've
I
done
know. It's
everything
really
right, and
sad.
then they're just yeah,
It's
yeah, in a
really
room.
sad. And we've had people in disability housing, and the state of the way that they're living and the housing and social housing. It Some of the social housing, the mold is so bad, and a lot of people have multiple children in these houses who are all sick with rashes and colds and eczema, and people sleep in tents outside their homes.
Because that's kind of the checkpoint, isn't it? If you feel better when you
Yeah,
leave the house,
yeah,
possibly mold,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
When
exactly.
you
Yeah,
go in the house and then all of a sudden, oh God, oh, that feeling is back again. But when you leave and you go out and you're wandering about in the world going, oh, I'm having a good day today. But it's only because you're out of the house
yeah.
amongst it.
It's funny. When I used to leave my house, so I used to go away, I'd actually get even more sick because my body was trying to get rid of the mold and it couldn't, because 25% of us have a gene, and that gene, the HLA or DRDQ gene, is part of the celiac family, and that means you can't actually get rid of mold. So, 4 people in a house, 2 have the gene, everyone's ingesting mold spores. 2 of them are basically pooping it out because that's what we do. We bind it, we poo it out. And then the other 2 are ingesting, but their body can't get rid of it. So what it does, it starts disrupting everything. And it's different for some. Some people it's on their lungs, some people it's in their body. Like
Yeah.
it's very hard to pinpoint some of the symptoms.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah, so
Nora describes it as 1 in 4. So if you've got a household of 4, one person might have it, 3 won't. That person will be ill.
yeah,
They might be a bit nutty, like they seem like they're nutty, like they're cranky
yeah,
all the time, or they're just got,
yeah.
brain fog. There's something that just seems wrong with them. And the other 3 sit there going, there's
We're,
something like
we're
it's
fine.
you. You're just
Yeah.
crazy because there's nothing wrong.
And unfortunately, it's often women. And the reason why it's often women is because of our hormones and our immune system, and that
Okay.
often that we are got more of a propensity to get sick from mold. It's not always the way, but it does
Yep.
tend to be a lot of women.
Yep.
Men tend not to believe the women. It gets blamed on hormones. And
Yep.
there was an amazing woman that went around to a lot of psychiatric units in Australia, and she went and tested a lot of the patients for mold toxicity, and she found that 25% of them all had mold toxicity, and that had created some significant psychiatric illness. So that's, yeah, fascinating. There's some really fascinating studies. But the government don't really recognize mold properly. I've been working with Dr. Gordon Reed here on the Central Coast
Yep.
to try and get the industry regulated so that we're all beating to the same drum. We're all following proper protocols with
Yep.
IICRC, and that people are actually properly trained, and that we're using the protocols around mold remediation.
Yep.
But also that mold illness is recognized. Medicare do not recognize it. I spent
Yeah.
tens of thousands of dollars trying to get well. I was lucky. That was money we didn't have. It was money for our future I had to spend. But a lot
Yep.
of people don't have that money.
No.
And so you can't get well because it's so expensive, and there's no rebates, there's no support, all the blood
Yep.
tests you've got to pay for. So that
Yep.
has to change. Like this is my mission, is to get this change and to get Medicare. And I'm really going to push more with the government now. And I don't know if there's a doctor, not doctor, but Lucy Wicks, the MP
Right.
here on the Central Coast. She also lived in mold. So
Okay.
due to catch up with her. I'll hopefully see Gordon on Friday at these awards that we're going to be at, and
Yep.
give him a bit of a nudge, because he was in Canberra talking about it. So he's been in Parliament really trying to champion more awareness around mold. So.
Yeah, I know. When I was so I'm in Chinchilla in Queensland, which is, you know, Midwest, right? And when I came down for the Women in Business Connect Awards, I came down to Dubbo, stayed at my cousin's place who owns a dry cleaners. Then I went across to Orange to a girlfriend over in Orange, and she's friends with the guy who actually must be pretty close. That's either the mayor or is planning on being the mayor, like, you know, like,
yeah,
he's running to be mayor of Orange, and then back across the Nora, and then others. And so each place I stopped and said, you know, like, so I've run into this fascinating world of mold. And my cousin owns a dry cleaner. So it becomes a really interesting story because, you know, they do stuff with water and stuff like that. And then the question becomes, you know, like, you know, so how do they get rid of it, and how does this work, and what about when it comes back? And then you know, and there's so much mold here in Dubbo. There's so much mold in Dubbo. And then I go over to Orange, and the mayor of Orange, or the will be mayor of Orange, he turns around and he goes, you know, there's mold everywhere in Orange. I've gone, apparently it's everywhere. Like,
it feels like it's following you everywhere. I feel like you're like the mold.
No, and I've set it up to speak so that then they go, you know what's everywhere. And my girlfriend Zoe, she used to have 3 B&Bs in Sydney. And so she knows of it too, because, you know, you run 3 B&Bs and you've got all these people in all the time, and she's like, you know, it'd be there. So, you know, how do you deal with that? So it's quite interesting where it is everywhere. I know when I go to Nora's webinars with Nature's Defence, she says 47% of houses. She said, but it's not necessarily the houses that we think. Like, we think it's the older houses. Okay, that makes sense. But she said it's the new houses, because the new houses are built with this like air envelope or whatever she calls it. But ultimately, how I take it when I describe to the boys, it's like this, right? There's like a vacuum system inside of our house to keep the energy rating good, right? You don't want the air conditioning leaking out. You don't want the heating leaking out. You don't want the heat leaking in when the air conditioner's off, on and off. So therefore, there's this envelope that is inside the house that's not got the cross-contamination of the outside air, so that to keep it energy rated, it's not filtering back and forth. As a result, if you've got something that's created mold, well, now where is it going? Because it's not getting ventilated out anywhere. It's now getting stuck in the house. So because of the energy rating, we've in effect created a drama that it's a bit like smoking. You didn't know it was a drama until 40 years later, when everyone started dropping dead with lung cancer. Just didn't know it was a problem at the time. But now it's a problem. And now what do we have to do? Because you have to fix the issue and then stop the issue from starting in the first place. It's quite a big deal, isn't it?
It's huge. And the US are years ahead of us. So they really have been dealing with this a lot with mold, and they talk about it. There's so many more doctors, there's much more awareness, there's rebates. It's much more cost effective to get testing done. And so they are really actually the kind of the blueprint of where we need to get to in Australia.
Okay.
But the new houses are just as susceptible, but a lot of it's the way that properties are built in Australia as well. They're built on slabs, they're built into rock and things like that. And so naturally that you're going to have more moisture. And we just get such heavy rainfall as well. But saying that, you know, Asia as well is really bad, like Bali, Thailand,
It's really
Singapore,
everywhere, isn't it? I mean, it is
even the
nature's
UK,
defense,
even the UK. Like
right?
there was a little
Oh
boy
my
that
God.
there was a boy that died in the UK, and they've now set a law there because of this young boy that died in public housing from mold.
They must have
But
it everywhere. It's so
yeah,
damp
well,
over
it
in,
is everywhere. It's everywhere, but it
ultimately, it's
grows quickly here because of the
nature's
humidity.
trying to pull it all down, right? What we build, nature's trying to bring back to the ground level.
I hadn't thought about it like that, but it's actually like a horror movie, isn't it? Where it's like rah, taking over.
How for us both to live together, dude, just stay out of the house. Like, I'll look after the inside if you could just look after the
Yeah,
outside.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Camilla, for
Oh,
jumping
so
on 40 minutes of fame with me.
great to talk to you, and you're so knowledgeable about mold. It's fantastic. It feels like you're a bit like the mold oracle. There's a lot you to know a lot.
It's from collecting so many different
Yeah,
stories.
it's
So part of it is
fantastic.
I get to talk to, well, I get to talk to you, you're a mold remediator, and so is Nora. But along the way as a sales trainer, because I've been around Nora for 4 years, and then she said, "Can you teach my sales reps how to speak to?" She said, "I want to teach cleaners how to do this clean molded clean," and I say that loosely because hers is kill and remove, a different
Yeah,
way,
yeah,
right? So in that, I've gone, there's other people that come across mold. There's people who pull up carpet. There's ones that are, tilers in
yeah,
the bathrooms and doing
yeah,
bathrooms joinerers. And I've gone, let me make a few phone calls. I'm just curious to know. And I just make this phone call. Like I'll call a carpet place and say, from time to time, when you pull up carpet, do you ever come across mold? Let me tell you a story. And then I've got like all
yeah,
these extra stories. So I've collected stories from all over the place, which then, yes, makes me, as you call, I like it, a little bit of an oracle, but only based off the stories that I keep collecting along the
yeah.
way, and who's doing
Brilliant.
what and how we're all trying to fix it, and why people like you are so important in the remediation of trying to fix it as well. So thank you so much.
Oh,
Great.
pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.